You do not violate Soviet airspace, not in the 1950s, not when the Cold War is tightening like a steel band around the world, not when the Soviet Union builds its air defense network like an iron cathedral stretching across 11 time zones. Everyone agrees on the rule. If you fly into the USSR, you will be seen. If you are seen, you will be tracked. If you are tracked, you will be shot down. It is as certain as gravity, as cold as Siberian steel. The Soviets field thousands of radar stations, their sweeping beams overlapping like giant, invisible walls. They deploy tens of thousands of anti-aircraft guns, their barrels aimed skyward, like a forest of iron fingers. They station MiG-15s, MiG-17s, and MiG-19s at bases from the Baltic to the Far East, all ready to scramble within minutes of a radar contact. Western analysts call the Soviet Union the denied area, a fortress of sky, a domain beyond reach. The Kremlin shares that confidence. To them, their sky is inviolable, perfect, sealed, protected by technology, doctrine, and sheer geography. And then you hear the truth that holds all this together. No aircraft has ever crossed the Soviet heartland and come back alive. This belief becomes doctrine. Doctrine becomes strategy. Strategy becomes dogma. But in 1954, inside a cramped Lockheed office in Burbank, California, one engineer sits across from CIA officials and hears the rule firsthand. He listens, he nods, he takes notes. And then, when they finish laying out the absolute impossibility of their request, he says something that changes the Cold War. We can break that rule. Because Kelly Johnson does not accept barriers. He designs past them. He builds beyond them. He looks at the sky and refuses to believe anyone owns more of it than he does. And soon the Soviets will stare at their radar screens in disbelief as a NATO spy plane drifts above their entire empire, untouched, unseen, and unexplained. Because the rule is about to be rewritten. Kelly Johnson is 44 years old, short-tempered, sharp-minded, a perfectionist so uncompromising that his engineers joke he can spot a design flaw from across the room. He grew up in Ishpeming, Michigan, the son of Swedish immigrants who taught him two things: that hard work matters, and that if someone tells you something's impossible, it's because they can't do it, not because you can't. He carries that belief into engineering school. He brings it with him to Lockheed. He turns it into a career of solving problems no one else can solve. The P-38 Lightning. He solves the stability issues others claim are insurmountable. The P-80, America's first operational jet. He builds it with his team in 143 days, a feat that still echoes through aerospace history. By the early 1950s, he leads the most innovative engineering division in the world, Skunk Works. A handful of buildings, a small elite team, a culture built on speed, secrecy, and absolute precision. Kelly Johnson is the man you call when the world is breaking and you need something that defies every established rule. And that is exactly why the CIA walks into his office. The Cold War has reached a tipping point. The Soviets detonate nuclear bombs faster than expected. American analysts fear a bomber gap. Politicians warn of a missile gap. The truth is that no one knows how many bombers the Soviets have, or how many missiles, or how close they are to striking distance. There is no intelligence, no eyes over the Iron Curtain, no clarity, only guesses and fear. The CIA needs photographs, they need details, they need proof, but they cannot get it. Not with traditional reconnaissance aircraft, not with human spies, not with balloons. So they ask Kelly Johnson for something unprecedented. Build us an aircraft that flies so high the Soviets cannot touch it. Not their fighters, not their guns, not their radar. An aircraft that flies in a realm where no interceptor can climb. An aircraft invisible to the world's largest air defense network. An aircraft the Soviets will see and not understand. Kelly sketches the idea on yellow notepads. A wingspan wider than a B-17, a fuselage light enough to lift a glider, a modified J-57 engine breathing thin air, a cockpit sealed like a space capsule, a camera capable of photographing missile launch sites from 70,000 plus feet, weight stripped to the bone, no armor, no weapons, no ejection survival guarantee. Because altitude is the weapon. Altitude is the shield. Altitude is the breakthrough. Kelly proposes an aircraft that lives on the edge of physics, in a place where the sky is too thin to support flight, too thin to carry sound, and too thin to sustain human life. He knows no one else can build it. He knows what his team can do. He knows the stakes. So he accepts, immediately, without hesitation, because he trusts his engineering the way a swordsman trusts his blade. And now the clock starts. The Soviets expand their nuclear arsenal every month. Washington demands answers yesterday. The world moves toward a horizon no one can see clearly. Kelly Johnson must design a machine that outruns an empire, outclimbs radar physics, and survives in a realm no aircraft has ever dared to fly. He does not know if it will work. He does not know if pilots can endure the danger. He does not know if the Soviets will catch on before it's too late. But he moves forward anyway, because the denied area is about to open, and the Soviet Union is about to encounter something that makes no sense. A NATO spy plane drifting untouched above the heart of their defenses. Its name is the U-2, its creator is Kelly Johnson, and its story is about to rewrite the Cold War. The desert is still when Kelly Johnson arrives at Groom Lake in June 1956. Heat ripples in the distance. The sky is cloudless. The air tastes of dust and jet fuel. Before him sits the aircraft that should not exist. Long wings, thin fuselage, barely any structural reinforcement. More glider than fighter, more experiment than airplane. And yet, this is the machine that will challenge the single most guarded airspace in human history. Kelly knows the stakes. If the U-2 fails during its first tests, the CIA will abandon the project. If it succeeds, it will fly into places no pilot has ever returned from alive. He stands with his clipboard as the ground crew pulls chocks. A prototype, Article 347, rolls into position. The pilot straps in, but Kelly's heart is the one that tightens. This is his design, his signature, his reputation, his burden. The engine starts with a high, metallic shriek. The long, delicate wings vibrate. Kelly tenses. They were never meant to withstand turbulence, never meant for harsh maneuvering, never meant to be anything except perfect in a regime of flight where perfection is the only protection. The aircraft begins its takeoff roll. It accelerates fast, too fast for something this long and light. At 70 knots, the wings bite air. At 80, the nose lifts. At 90, the aircraft leaves the runway almost reluctantly, like a bird unsure it wants to fly. Kelly watches it climb, 5,000 feet, 10,000, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, still rising. No other aircraft on Earth can do this. When the radio crackles through static, the words echo across the desert. Altitude 70200, still climbing. Kelly closes his eyes for a moment. Relief floods him. But only for a moment. Because now the real test comes. Now this machine will be asked to do what no aircraft has ever done. It will enter the Soviet Union. And Kelly knows that if anything goes wrong, the world will not just lose a pilot. It might lose peace. On July 4th, 1956, at 0300 hours, Kelly Johnson stands in a quiet operations room in Wiesbaden, West Germany. The lights are dim, the radios hiss. The tension is thick enough to taste. This is the first operational mission. The first time the U-2 will challenge the greatest air defense network on the planet. The first moment the Soviets might discover that their sky, their proud, inviolable sky, is not theirs at all. Kelly is not in the cockpit. He is not over the USSR, but this is still his moment, his responsibility, his engineering on trial against Stalin's entire legacy. Back in the air, the U-2 climbs 50,000 feet, 60, 70. The sky darkens to deep indigo, the horizon curves, the aircraft enters a realm normally reserved for astronauts. Kelly listens to the telemetry. He knows every sound, every vibration, every temperature shift. He knows that if the pilot deviates more than 5 knots from target speed, the aircraft will stall or tear itself apart. He knows the margin for error is the width of a heartbeat. Then comes the moment. The U-2 crosses into Soviet airspace. Kelly feels it like a physical weight. History is now in motion, and the Soviets have no idea what is coming. Hundreds of miles away, inside a Soviet radar station near Minsk, a young operator watches his P-14 screen. A blip appears, faint, inconsistent, flickering in and out. He adjusts gain. The blip returns. He measures altitude. His jaw tightens. 21 kilometers. More than 70,000 feet. Impossible, absolutely impossible. He calls his superior. The superior arrives, frowns, taps the glass. No aircraft can fly that high. No aircraft exists in the world that can. But the blip stays. It drifts deeper into Soviet territory. Scramble orders blast through loudspeakers. Sirens wail. MiG-17 fighters roar down the runway. Kelly listens as mission controllers receive Soviet radio intercepts. Target observed, very high altitude. Climbing to engage. Climbing, climbing, climbing. He knows what's coming next. He's run the calculations. He's tested the envelopes. He's measured the lift and the drag and the engine thrust. The MiGs climb 50,000 feet, 52, 54, and then they hit the wall. Kelly grips the back of a chair. He imagines the view from above. The fighters, tiny silver needles, claw upward through thinning air. The pilots pushing throttle against physics. The engines screaming, the wings trembling, but the U-2 drifting serenely miles above them, untouched, untouchable. Russian voices crackle in frustration over the intercept channel. We cannot reach it. Aircraft at unmeasurable altitude. Impossible altitude. Kelly feels a grim satisfaction, not joy, not triumph, just confirmation that his creation does exactly what he designed it to do, defy everything the Soviets believe about their own scheme. As the U-2 crosses deeper into the USSR, its cameras click steadily. Kelly imagines the images even before they return. Bomber bases, nuclear test sites, missile launch pads, airfields carved into tundra, storage depots miles wide, factories hidden behind forest belts. The Soviets think these sites are invisible. They think secrecy protects them. They think altitude will shield them from foreign eyes. But Kelly's cameras pierce that illusion. What he built is not just an aircraft. It is a revelation, a shift in the balance of global knowledge. The first mission ends. The U-2 returns. No damage, no interception, no evidence it was even close. Kelly listens as analysis teams confirm what he already knows. The Soviets could see something on radar, but they could not understand it. Altitude readings were inconsistent. Speed readings were contradictory. Some stations reported a balloon. Others swore it was a bomber. Some said it was too slow to be a jet. Others insisted it vanished faster than anything they had seen. The Soviets are confused, blindsided, humiliated, and Kelly knows. This confusion is his weapon. Over the next weeks, Kelly oversees more flights, each one deeper, each one riskier, each one confirming that his aircraft lives in a realm the Soviets cannot reach. The pattern is always the same. Radar sees a flicker. Interceptors launch. Missiles fire. Nothing comes within miles. Kelly pores over every radar intercept transcript. He reads reports of Soviet pilots stalling at high altitude. He studies Soviet efforts to predict U-2 flight paths. Always wrong, because the aircraft can climb so quickly and so silently that it breaks every expectation. He notes how Soviet engineers begin recalculating their radar equations. They add altitude lines they never thought they'd need. They revise manuals. They adjust antenna sweeps. But none of it matters. The U-2 is simply too high, too light, too stable, too efficient, too alien to their assumptions. The Soviets cannot compute a world where an aircraft behaves like this, where it glides at the edge of space, where it ignores the entire arsenal below. Kelly knows what they're thinking. This must be propaganda. This must be a hoax. This must be fabricated, because nothing in their system of understanding can explain a plane that flies at an altitude 3 miles beyond their interceptor's ceiling. One night, Kelly receives a translated Soviet communication. It comes from a high-ranking radar commander, furious and exhausted. It reads, "We cannot understand how this aircraft remains beyond reach. Our instruments do not agree. Our interceptors cannot climb. Our missiles cannot lock. There is no defense against this altitude." Kelly reads the message twice, then a third time, because this is the moment the Soviet Union, the world's most paranoid superpower, finally accepts the truth. Someone has built a machine that rewrites the limits of flight. And that someone is Kelly Johnson. Kelly sits in the operations room long after the pilots land. He studies altitude logs, engine temperature charts, fuel curves, and radar intercept reports. He reads through CIA analysis, Soviet transmission intercepts, and raw telemetry. Every line confirms the same truth. The Soviets cannot understand an aircraft operating at 21 kilometers. They cannot grasp flight dynamics in that thin atmosphere. They cannot compute lift coefficients at near space altitudes. They cannot imagine a NATO aircraft floating above their entire military machine, untouched. Kelly built the U-2 for exactly this moment. He knew altitude would be its armor. He knew physics would protect it more than steel or speed, because no matter how loudly a missile roars off its launcher, it still dies in the upper stratosphere. No matter how powerful a jet engine is, it still suffocates when the air thins below practicality. No matter how advanced radar becomes, the signal still bends, scatters, and breaks against the curvature of the Earth at extreme heights. Most nations spent years chasing speed. Kelly chose altitude. Altitude no one else dared to reach. Now the Soviets are staring upward at something their entire doctrine never prepared them for. Kelly receives another briefing. It contains reports from Soviet radar arrays attempting to track the U-2's altitude, but the readings make no sense. Some radars detect the aircraft at 19 kilometers. Others estimate 22 kilometers. Some lose it completely. Others swear it is diving, even when it isn't. Kelly smiles as he reads. He knows the cause: radar refraction. Above 70,000 feet, the air density is so low that radar beams bend unpredictably. Signals decay into static. Reflections scatter. Tracking computers, primitive analog behemoths, misinterpret everything. To the Soviets, the U-2 seems to flicker between a weather balloon, a bomber, a glitch, a phantom, a ghost. They are trying to measure something with tools built for another world. Kelly imagined this moment years ago. He predicted it, designed for it, weaponized it. The Soviets' most advanced radar arrays are blind above a threshold they didn't believe anything could cross. And now an American aircraft lives up there. Kelly receives a report from the CIA. Soviet MiG-19 pilots are furious. They tried chasing a U-2 again. They reached 50,000 feet, 55,000, 58,000. Then the same thing happened. Engines gasped, controls softened, wings buffeted, cabins frosted. They stalled, they fell, they broke off the pursuit. Kelly imagines the scene, MiG engines gasping like dying lungs, trying to breathe air that barely exists, pilots wrestling with aircraft that were never meant to climb into near vacuum, Soviet ground commanders shouting for altitude readings that make no physical sense. Every pursuit ends with the same radio call, unable to intercept, target unreachable. Kelly leans back in his chair. He knows exactly why. Fighters need dense air to climb. Above 60,000 feet, even the best engines starve. Thrust plummets, lift collapses, the aircraft stalls. The U-2, it floats, quiet, weightless, untouchable, exactly as Kelly intended. Weeks later, Kelly receives a classified packet. Inside, transcripts of Soviet missile launch attempts. The Soviets fired older AA missiles, crude compared to future systems, but lethal at lower altitudes. They rose fast, streaked upward, burned hot. And then, every missile met the same fate. Fuel exhaustion, loss of velocity, gravity taking control, a long arcing fall back to Earth. Kelly closes the folder. Altitude again, thin air again, the Achilles heel of early missile design. Most missiles are built for engagements between 10,000 and 40,000 feet. The U-2 flies almost twice that. At those heights, a missile burns too much fuel too early. It slows, it drags, it chokes on its own design limits. This is what Kelly built the U-2 to exploit. He didn't beat Soviet weapons. He outran their physics. Not everything comforts Kelly. He knows altitude cuts both ways. Above 70,000 feet, the U-2 enters the coffin corner, a razor-thin band where stall speed and overspeed are only 5 to 8 knots apart. Kelly knows those numbers intimately. He has tested them in wind tunnels. He has seen the charts. He has watched models flutter and snap. If a pilot slows even slightly, the wing stalls. If he accelerates slightly, the aircraft overspeeds and loses structural integrity. There is no recovery at that altitude. You die before you can fall to denser air. Kelly designed the wings as light as possible. He knew the risk. He accepted it. He told pilots the truth. Altitude is your armor. Altitude is your coffin. And yet, the U-2 holds, flight after flight, mission after mission. Kelly's design dances on the edge of physics, but it never steps off. Kelly receives something extraordinary, a translated summary of Soviet internal complaints. Radar operators write altitude beyond instrument range. Fighter pilots write engines lose power at pursuit altitude. Anti-aircraft commanders write missiles burn out far below interception height. One senior Soviet general writes the bluntest assessment. If the target is above 20 kilometers, there is no defense. Kelly stares at that line for several seconds. The Soviet Union, the superpower that boasts about invincible defenses, has admitted defeat in its own internal communications. Not because NATO outsmarted them, not because CIA tricked them, not because American weaponry overwhelmed them, but because altitude beat them, altitude Kelly engineered, altitude that breaks radar, altitude that kills missiles, altitude that suffocates interceptors, altitude that harms everything except the U-2. Kelly walks through the hangar at Groom Lake. He runs his hand along the U-2's wing. It feels fragile, almost temporary, like something meant for a museum display rather than combat. And yet this fragile thing humiliated the world's second-largest superpower. He studies the landing struts, the camera arrays, the intake geometry. Every piece has a story. Every piece solves a problem no one else tried to solve. A plane this light shouldn't handle crosswinds. A plane this high shouldn't maintain steady lift. A plane this long shouldn't survive temperature gradients of 130 degrees between takeoff and altitude. A camera this powerful shouldn't stay stable in air that turbulent. No pressure suit should keep a pilot alive at that height. But Kelly forced the impossible into existence. He knows it. but he doesn't boast about it. He's already thinking of improvements. Better engines, better materials, better cameras, stronger anti-radar shaping, because he knows the Soviets aren't done. They will try something new, and the U-2's invulnerability is temporary. But for now, in this moment, Kelly has built a machine that flies in a domain the Soviets cannot map, cannot touch, and cannot comprehend. Kelly receives updated Soviet intercept logs. They are almost desperate. Operators ask, is it a balloon? Is it a new bomber? Is it a weather anomaly? Is it multiple aircraft? Nothing adds up. The signature is too steady to be a balloon, too slow to be a bomber, too high to be a jet, too consistent to be a radar glitch. The Soviets are staring at a creature from a world they do not understand. Kelly reads these reports quietly. He doesn't smile, he doesn't gloat. He simply acknowledges the truth. They don't understand the aircraft because they don't understand the altitude. The U-2 is not just beyond their reach. It is beyond their imagination. But every mission deepens Kelly's anxiety. He knows the Soviets will adapt. They will improve radar. They will improve interceptors. They will design new missiles. They will pour money into air defense like a dam about to burst. He sees the storm coming long before anyone else. He reads Soviet design proposals. He sees references to new systems, higher ceilings, faster propulsion, radar-driven missiles. He senses a shift. The U-2 may be untouchable now, but that immunity will not last forever. And his fears are confirmed when a CIA briefing lands on his desk. Soviet Union accelerating development of a high-altitude surface-to-air missile. Kelly looks up from the report. He knows what this means. The Soviets have admitted defeat, and now they are preparing for revenge. But that belongs to tomorrow. Today, in this era, in these missions, the Soviets still cannot touch the U-2, and they still cannot understand why. Kelly Johnson watches his creation return again and again, bringing secrets no spy could steal, images no satellite could yet take, and proof the Soviets could not hide behind the Iron Curtain forever. His design has broken a superpower's illusion of invulnerability, and with each mission, the world moves closer to clarity and closer to danger. Kelly Johnson stands in a dim room in Washington. Sheets of film are laid across long, light tables. Analysts, generals, CIA officers, all hover over the images the U-2 brought back. Images his aircraft captured, images that should not exist. They whisper, they point, they circle areas with grease pencils. But Kelly is silent. He watches the room, he reads expressions. He senses shock turning into understanding, and understanding transforming into strategy. Because the U-2 hasn't just flown, it has shifted the entire structure of the Cold War. For years, American intelligence feared a bomber gap. The idea that the Soviets possessed hundreds of long-range bombers capable of reaching U.S. soil. Politicians thundered about it. Newspapers printed dire warnings. The Air Force demanded funding to match a threat that no one could verify. Then the U-2 flies. Kelly's aircraft soars over Engels Air Base, Olenia Air Base, and others. It sees everything. It counts bombers. It measures runways. It captures dispersal patterns. There is no bomber gap, not even close. The Soviets have fewer operational long-range bombers than feared, far fewer. Kelly watches one analyst remove a chart from the wall, crumble it, and drop it in a trash bin. His aircraft has not only gathered intelligence, it has destroyed a myth. A myth that shaped budgets, a myth that shaped fear, a myth that shaped politics. The truth is in the photographs. The truth comes from 70,000 feet. And the truth comes from Kelly Johnson's design. Next come the missile sites. For years, American analysts feared the Soviets were far ahead in ballistic missile production. But the U-2 reveals something else. Test sites are fewer. Facilities are smaller. Launch infrastructure is less advanced than expected. Soviet production is not matching their propaganda. Kelly watches the CIA piece together Soviet missile capability with a clarity they have never had before. The panic begins to soften. The fear sharpens into knowledge. Knowledge becomes strategy, and Kelly knows this is what the U-2 was built for. Altitude as a viewpoint. Altitude as a truth serum. Altitude as a scalpel cutting away lies. The aircraft photographs. Semipalatinsk testing grounds. Kapustin Yar launch facilities. Turatum missile complexes. Storage bunkers north of the Volga. Production lines hidden behind industrial facades. American intelligence officers stare at these images with wide eyes. This is what they needed. This is what they begged the CIA for. This is what Kelly delivered. They now know how much uranium the Soviets refine. They know how fast warheads are being assembled. They know which airfields would launch nuclear strikes. They know where early ICBMs are being tested. For the first time in the Cold War, the United States is not guessing. It is seeing. And the reason it can see is a black aircraft drifting in near space, protected not by armor or weapons, but by altitude Kelly engineered into existence. But in Moscow, the reaction is something else entirely. Kelly receives a classified intercept. A Soviet general slams his fist on a conference table and shouts, "We cannot defend the motherland from the stratosphere." He's right. They cannot. Not yet. For a moment, Kelly feels something like pride. Not arrogance. Not triumph. Just a calm awareness that he did exactly what he set out to do. Expose the Soviet Union's vulnerability through physics they never imagined would be weaponized. But the Soviets do not sit still. They do not shrug and accept defeat. They move, and they move fast. Kelly receives intelligence. The Soviets are accelerating a new program, the S-75 Dvina surface-to-air missile. He reads the specifications. Altitude envelope far higher than previous systems. Radar-guided, multi-stage booster, designed specifically to kill high-altitude intruders. Kelly breathes out slowly. He knew this day would come. He told the CIA this window would not last forever. Altitude gave the U-2 supremacy, but all supremacy invites countermeasures. The race is on. The Soviets are building something dangerous, something that can climb faster, burn hotter, and reach higher. Kelly's engineering success is now forcing the Soviet Union to reinvent its entire air defense system. This is the ripple effect, the unintended, unavoidable consequence of building something too good. Kelly attends a briefing at the Pentagon. Maps are unrolled. Slides snap into projectors. Generals speak in clipped tones. They show Arctic radar lines shifting, bomber routes changing, nuclear targeting models updated, satellite programs accelerated, NATO's defensive posture rewritten. Every one of these changes stems from U-2 intelligence. His aircraft, this fragile, improbable machine, has become the cornerstone of NATO's understanding of the Soviet Union. Kelly stands quietly at the back of the room. He listens to phrases like, "We know this because of Aquatone. We confirmed this through high-altitude reconnaissance. We adjusted this because of U-2 imagery." He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The proof is on the walls. His work is shaping the Cold War's map in real time. Kelly receives a summary from a CIA station in Europe. Multiple Soviet internal documents now reference unacceptable exposure and loss of strategic secrecy. One line stands out. "We can no longer conceal our programs from American observation." Kelly reads it slowly. This is the moment he designed toward without ever saying it aloud. Altitude wasn't just a flight profile. It was a battering ram, one that splintered Soviet secrecy wide open. The Iron Curtain still stands politically, but physically, In the upper atmosphere, it has been shattered. In private CIA meetings, analysts speak plainly. Without U-2 intelligence, we would be blind. These overflights prevented overreaction. They stabilized nuclear planning. Kelly hears the words. He understands the magnitude. The U-2 didn't just protect pilots. It protected cities. It prevented false assumptions. It calmed hysteria about non-existent bomber fleets. It prevented unnecessary nuclear spending. It created parity where fear once dominated. The aircraft flew untouched, and because it flew untouched, it bought time. Time for diplomacy, time for satellites, time for better decisions. Altitude has done more for peace than anyone predicted. Kelly receives one more intercepted Soviet communication, a concise, blunt, angry message from an air defense commander summarizing years of frustration. The Americans have found a way to fly beyond the reach of the Soviet state. Kelly sets the paper down. He exhales. He feels something shift in his chest. A complex mix of victory and dread. This wasn't about outsmarting the enemy. This wasn't about humiliating them. This wasn't about proving American engineering superiority. This was about survival, and now everyone knows it. The Soviet Union cannot touch the U-2, and that fact has changed the Cold War. For now, Kelly Johnson stands alone on the Groom Lake tarmac. The desert dusk settles into a deep orange haze. A U-2 sits nearby, its long wings casting shadows across the concrete like stretched arms. It looks fragile, almost flimsy, but Kelly knows better than anyone how powerful it really is. This aircraft has flown where no fighter could reach. It has survived what no missile could kill. It has defied an empire that believed its skies were untouchable. And Kelly knows the truth no intelligence report will ever capture. Every time that aircraft left the runway, he felt the weight of it, the fear, the responsibility, the knowledge that one miscalculation, one flaw, could spark a crisis that reshapes the world. But the U-2 didn't break. It soared, because he built it to do exactly that. Kelly never speaks publicly about the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the private fear that someone, someday, might not return. He never talks about standing in control rooms, listening to static-filled radios, while the U-2 drifted above the teeth of the Soviet air defense network. He never talks about reading Soviet intercepts describing altitude readings that made no sense, or pilot voices cracking as their MiGs stalled below unreachable heights. He never talks about the burden of knowing that his aircraft was the one thing standing between global uncertainty and nuclear miscalculation. But he feels it, deeply, quietly, privately, because the U-2 was more than an engineering project. It was a knife edge between understanding and ignorance, between fear and fact, between peace and panic. Kelly reads a CIA memorandum summarizing the strategic impact of the U-2's untouched flights. The words strike him harder than he expects. Without U-2 intelligence, NATO would have been blind in the most dangerous decade of the Cold War. He knows what that means. He understands the historical weight of it. The U-2 reduced false assumptions. It prevented runaway arms races based on phantom threats. It helped maintain nuclear parity not through escalation, but through clarity. Altitude became understanding. Understanding became stability. The world is safer because his aircraft flew untouched. Kelly returns to Skunk Works. He steps through the doors of the same small buildings where the U-2 was forged. He watches young engineers sketch new concepts, new ideas, new impossibilities. He knows what comes next. He senses the future, higher altitudes, faster speeds, sleeker frames, new materials. His team is already imagining aircraft that don't just outrun Soviet radar, but outrun the horizon. And all of it, every scrap of daring, every step toward the next frontier, is powered by the breakthrough he made when he decided to outrun a superpower with altitude instead of speed. The U-2 becomes the foundation, a stepping stone to the impossible, a symbol of what happens when one person refuses to accept conventional limits. Decades pass. The world changes, borders shift, wars end, new ones begin, but the U-2 does not retire. It evolves, it upgrades, it grows stronger. Kelly lives long enough to see later variants fly. He watches his creation outlive the aircraft that were supposed to replace it. And he sees something almost poetic. The Soviets, who once could not understand how the U-2 flew untouched, now treat it with grudging respect, the way warriors respect an enemy weapon that refuses to break. He watches from a distance as the aircraft continues gathering intelligence around the globe, its long wings cutting across the sky as gracefully as they did the day it first took flight. Even in his final years, Kelly receives updates. New reconnaissance programs, new missions, new challenges, new upgrades to flight systems and sensors. Every time he hears about another successful U-2 mission, he feels a quiet satisfaction, not pride, not ego, just certainty. He built something that mattered, something that lasted, something the world wasn't ready for. Kelly Johnson passes away in 1990 at the age of 80. By then, he has designed or shaped some of the most important aircraft ever built. But the U-2 remains the turning point in his life, the moment he proved that the sky is not a wall, but a doorway. His legacy is not just a machine, it is a mindset, a blueprint for daring, a reminder that altitude can be armor, innovation can be a shield, and imagination can be a weapon. The Soviets couldn't understand how the U-2 flew untouched because they never imagined anyone would try. But Kelly did. He imagined altitude that seemed absurd. He imagined wings that seemed too long. He imagined an aircraft that looked too fragile to survive the Cold War's brutality, and then he built it anyway. You stand on the tarmac beside the U-2, just as Kelly once did. The wind cuts across the desert. The sun drops behind the mountains. The long black wings stretch across the concrete like a monument to everything he risked and everything he achieved. The Soviets could not touch it. They could not track it. They could not understand it. And because of that aircraft, because of Kelly Johnson, the world saw the truth hidden behind the Iron Curtain. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. Thank you for ensuring that Kelly Johnson and the legacy of the U-2 do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.